This is the Freeheel Life Podcast, episode number 191. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the, not Freeheel Life shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm actually sitting here in a hotel room in Minnesota on my way back from Midwest Telefest. So, my apologies, I didn't get a podcast up last week because it was an awesome podcast, but I was having a little bit of issues with doing audio and stuff, and then I sort of ran out of time and had to drive all the way to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for a fantastic event, which now I'm heading home from. I'm sure I'll do a little debrief about that and the amazingness that is Midwest Telefest, but my apologies for not getting this up sooner, because my plan was to get it up last week on Monday ahead of the festival, just so I could give a little background to the event. Anyways, neither here nor there. I'm happy I can get it done. I hope you will enjoy this. So this podcast is going to be all about sort of the origins of, the origins of Midwest Telefest, where it came from, kind of how it started 34 years ago. I became aware of a business called Life Tools that was an outdoor shop, and you'll kind of get the history throughout this podcast about how it all began. But when I went to the 30th annual Midwest Telefest 4 years ago, I was made aware that this is kind of how it all started, sort of this organic nature of people getting together, winter camping, and so on and so on. And then it sort of blossomed into an actual event. So I was very intrigued at that point. I'm always intrigued at understanding more the story, especially, being in the United States, like the sort of American telemark story. And there's all these different groups of people and figures and communities that have really shaped sort of how telemark grows in certain areas and obviously collectively. And I'm always fascinated by that. The Midwest, I'm always talking about how I think that's a great place for telemark to grow just because of the mountain size, access to sort of mom and pop resorts and stuff. But I was really fascinated at how this all started. So thought I'd dig in a little bit deeper, and I'm really excited to bring you this podcast. I'm not going to do any newsroom and notes this week just so we can get right into it. But I will be back next week. In the next couple of weeks, I'll be focusing on World Telemark Day events, meetups that are going to be happening, and talking more about that. So please send your events, location meetups, solo trips, whatever that you want to announce on the podcast to podcast@freeheellife.com. And I will make sure to announce those as we get closer to the first Saturday in March, World Telemark Day, the 10th annual. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast and all it represents, and the really cool story that is the origin of Midwest Telefest and the Life Tools business that started that. So let me know what you think, and I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. All right, you guys, welcome to the Freeheel Life Podcast. This is great to have all you here. Thanks for making it happen.
Thanks for hosting us.
Yeah. All right. Well, so, we've been talking a little bit before we got into this, but I want to be able to capture all this for people out there. And I guess I'll just preface, I'm sure I'll talk about this in the intro, but just prefacing that, telemark in North America has had a lot of little pods of people, that I've come across, and there's a lot of history, but I'm excited to have you guys here because I did not, even though I know there's a lot of telemark skiers in the Midwest, and this week I'm going to be heading to Midwest Telefest. I wanted to dig up the history a little bit, and I guess the easiest place to start with this, you guys, is who. I guess Craig, we started a little bit talking about where. What I'm curious about is where all of you maybe learned or saw telemark for the first time, because I know, Craig, you said you were in Boulder, Colorado, and saw a telemark skier. I guess who could give me a starting point here? Like where did telemark even begin in the Midwest? Like how did it? Obviously, it was from the 1800s, but how did it get to the Midwest? you know, I who wants to take a
maybe I
stab
could
at that?
take this. Maybe I could take this. I was living in Vail, and uh, I saw a dude skiing telemark, and I'm like, "What is that guy doing?" And I caught up, and I'm like, "What's this all about?" And he's like, "Oh, it's telemark skiing," and gave me a little like, this is how they used to do it. This is the righteous way. I'm like, okay. And he said, "Go talk to, I forget the guy's name, at Vail Mountaineering in Lions Head." And I did. I went down there, and they had a rental. Uh, what was it? Oslo snowfields. It wasn't extreme.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it was snowfields and Chenard Tutenage, and I rented a pair, and I went telemark skiing for the first time with nobody, no instruction, and it was just wild. It was fun. It was just exhilarating, and that was my intro, and that was in '86.
Yeah, for me, it was
So
like that.
kind
It
of
was in
wild.
'80. Oh, sorry, Brian, didn't even step in. For me, it was in the '80s. I was backcountry skiing in the Sierra Nevadas. I was camping and skiing. I had the regular old junk, skinny skis and bedroom slippers, boots. And I was standing on top of this mountain looking down at these trees and thinking, how am I going to get down that? And some dude comes behind me and he says, are you going to go or can I go ahead of him? I'm like, I thought he was joking. The dude skis down between the trees. It was phenomenal. And I came back to Green Bay and I said, John, I saw this dude. He was like Superman. And he goes, yeah. He says, it was probably telemark. We're all hearing about it, but, we're trying to figure it out. And, we had just seen it and there wasn't much. Of course, at that time, there was no internet. So, we didn't have videos. And there were a couple of old cross-country ski books that had, and the telemark ski turn. And then, they're like 3 drawings of what it was. And so we're out there on the hills trying to, learn how to do this stuff with cross-country ski equipment, no edges,
Double
slip,
camber.
double camber. And just all it was falling in, getting up and falling, getting up and falling, getting up. And then finally, I think Hermie started getting equipment, at the store and, the Snowfield 2s. And at that time, we didn't have skis. So I was mountain bindings on old
Alpine.
1948. Yeah, 1948 Alpine. I'm not shitting you. It was 1940 something. Hickory skis with the edges were screwed in, and doing that until finally we started to come up on softer equipment, and I think even mountain skis or mountain bindings on just downhill equipment until finally the industry caught up with it. But in the beginning, man, we were just kind of guessing and trying to figure it out. And a guy like maybe Brian Murphy would go out west, or we'd go out west and somebody would teach us something. We'd come back and share it with everybody. So that was what was probably the late '80s. I'm thinking is when we got started at that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
real quick before we go, I realize I've been talking to you guys before we hopped on, but maybe if you guys could each kind of just introduce yourselves too, because I want to hop back. This is great already, but I want to hop back into that. But maybe we can start with Brian and then kind of go Brian, Craig, Scott, Mike, John, and just give us a little introduction, like where you live, and I guess just give us a little bit of basic background so we know who, especially the audio people, so they know who they're talking or
Yeah.
listening
Well,
to.
if nobody calls me Brian, really. I mean, I'm Murph.
Murph.
Yeah, mostly Murph, kind of Brian. Um, for me, I live in Green Bay again. I'm a carpenter. I'm a tele skier, ice climber, former whitewater paddler, rock climber, um, former Life Tools employee. I don't know really what else to say about that. I traveled a lot. I lived out west many years. Traveled in Europe, traveled in South America. Speak okay Spanish, speak okay French, know a little bit of Samoan and Inuit. Not that that matters, but it's for real.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Inuit he speaks, of course, is I'm going to kill you for nose rubbing
No.
my wife.
Here's a cool. I'll give you a cool Inuit phrase. So de nada in Spanish is it's all good, it's all cool. De nada, it's nothing. In Inuit, it's lolly.
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 All right.
I knew
Lolly.
it.
There you go. There's your
So-
Inuit lesson for the day.
My background, I've been in the outdoors forever, and I wound up going to college in Boulder. And then by happenstance wound up back in Green Bay and stumbled on to the Life Tools Co-op, which was a little outdoor community above a food co-op with John. And so that place sold Chinese shoes, home brewing equipment, futons, and they had a little section of outdoor gear where all the cool kids in town hung out and we met each other. Well, then John tells me that the co-op's going out of business. And I'm like, well, then I'm moving out of this cow town and I'm going back to Colorado.
Yeah.
I had an epiphany and I said, John, let's buy out the co-op and let's turn it into a real mountain backpacking store. And he was like, really? I go, yeah, really. He goes, really? And that's the rest is history. All our friends wound up. That's how we met.
Oh, I love that. That's great. All right. And what about you, Scott?
Scott Berry, grew up in Marquette, Michigan. Lived in Wisconsin for a long time. So my thing was, I taught whitewater paddling and learned how to teleski. Started teaching some teleskiing and wanted to do. That was my dream is to do both. Summertime and wintertime, and it worked for a while.
Yeah.
And you live in let's see, Murph and Craig, you guys are in Green Bay still.
Yeah.
And then Scott, you're based out of Ouray, Colorado
Not
now.
still currently.
No, I'm actually, Josh, I'm on vacation in Colorado right now. I'm based out of Munising, Michigan now.
Uber.
Yep.
Yeah. Let me.
Just
Can
your ice
I just say something real quick? So Scott and PK, Paul Keen, my hands down to PK. They called me up like a week ago, and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to Colorado in a week." Like, what? Okay. You should have given me a little bit more heads up, man, because I would have been there with you.
Calling him out. All right, Mike, give us a little background on you.
Okay, so I'm from Green Bay. I'm still in Green Bay, and I've always been an outdoorsman since I was a kid. And so I was lucky. My business has always been traveling around the world for work, and it gave me an opportunity to ski on almost every continent, just everywhere. And so I was friends with John since the 80s. I think John started the store. John Hermanson started Life Tools, 70-something, right, John?
Right.
Is it 80-something?
It was in the 70s.
70s, right? Yeah. So I've known John since forever, and then as far as Telefest and teleskiing, I guess I was one of the guys with John and some of the early guys. I think 5 of us just started going to the Porkies and backcountry camping, and then next thing you know, we're trying to teleski, and kind of took off from there. Went from 5 guys to 10 guys to 15 guys, and we can get into more of the detail. Then I think Brian Murphy really kind of launched the whole thing by making it a gigantic thing instead of a bunch of guys sitting around a campfire telling farts jokes. Next thing you know, we're having a.
I need to say something right now. It was Craig that said we should make this a thing, and then we all took it upon ourselves to try and make it a thing. We didn't know what we were doing, but it was Craig that was the very impetus of Telefest. It was his like, hey, let's do this thing, and then we tried, and it became a thing, and then I kind of took it from there. But it was Craig's idea, to make it a thing, and I want that to be known.
I love that.
It began as the Totally Telly Weekend, and then they convinced me to change it to Telefest, and I was like, Telefest? Like Television Fest? What are you talking about?
No, it had to be more simple, and that's what I told you then.
But Brian had the vision to move it forward, so it's just my idea to turn it into a more of a commercial endeavor than try to promote the sport, really.
And my thing was, like I came back from Europe, but I'd been out west for a number of years, and then I find myself in this shithole called Green Bay. Apologies to Green Bay. I'm a Packer fan. My family's here and I love it here, but it's still Green Bay. I was like blown away at the talent and the heart of these people. I'm like, what? There's like a hippie store in Green Bay. There's like there's like a scene. There's like a thing. There's like real people here, and then I got hired there at Life Tools and the evolution of the whole thing, and I was just blown away, and that's why I didn't leave for 9 years.
I love that. Well, before we hop into that, let's get John's background real quick.
Yes.
Sure.
So this is John Hermanson.
Yeah. Like Craig explained, it did start out as a co-op, and it was kind of a back to the land scene, and wood stoves and hand tools and cooking equipment, and the futons were brought up, and beer making equipment, and so it was kind of a whole earth type of scene or store. And then different people showed up, like Mike Stone with his possum on his shoulder, and he had a pet possum, and would
like
come
an
up
actual live possum.
Yeah.
Yeah. She loved me. Whenever I said I'm going to Life Tools, she was on my shoulder and then on my head, ready to go. That's all I had to say. Life Tools. I had to spell it to my wife so that she wouldn't get too excited.
Mike, do you know that Fish song? Possum?
Yeah.
There's a song.
No, really?
Yeah, Fish, wow. Possum. Check it out.
Probably written for me.
John, are you from Green Bay originally?
He's a fib.
I was Rockford, Illinois originally, but went to school, University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, and then got involved with the co-op. And then, as Craig explained, it kind of reached a dead end. And so we put it on life-saving measures and kept it going. And, luckily, a bunch of things came together, and it was never a big financial success, but it was the success is because we're here talking to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what year? Okay, so what year was what year were you in college? Like where the co-op was the co-op before you guys took over?
Yeah, it was started in 1974, and then
Isn't it Moon Shadow, John? Moon Shadow?
There was another branch of things. There was a Moon Shadow mountaineering. Someone else that was involved and brought some equipment in and kind of primed the pump for that. But that probably wasn't a significant thing. But we did end up, 74 it started, And then, like I got involved in 78, thereabouts. And then Craig and I, when we incorporated it, and was it 1990?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's
1980 or 90?
90.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what So there was kind of 10 years in there that were a little foggy, I guess.
Let me set the scene.
Foggy.
1970s, right? So let me set the scene. It was an old storefront from like 1800 something. You walk in, the floors are all wood, creaky. Downstairs was the food co-op, where organics in 1970 meant everything.
Evergreen food co-op.
It meant everything was stale granola, stale everything, dried out tea. Even the honey that they sold in bulk was fermenting into mead, So, and then upstairs, you'd go up there, and there was John's place. It looked like somebody's house with too much junk in it,
Do you remember the cash register? That fucking thing weighed 500 pounds, man. You remember that, Hermie?
And it had couches you'd sit in it, and they were so old and broken down, your ass would hit the floor. So once you sat down, you weren't getting up again. But the whole place was full of really groovy stuff. It had, like glassware from France, for canning, and double, insulated jeans, and just stuff you couldn't find anywhere else. And that was what was unique about it. And
Amish clothing. We sold Amish broad fall pants, right, John?
Right.
Broad fall pants.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where there was no
Amish underwear with no elastic in it.
There was no zipper. Right above the it's like really the Amish have, where they're hung well. There's three buttons on top of both femur bones, that you just dropped. You just dropped this like 12 by 12 flap.
Either that or pee in your pants.
They're Amish broad fall pants. That's what they're
so
called.
did you guys? So from 80 to 90, it was still kind of a co-op, but you guys took over in 1990, right?
80. It was 89. It was 89
or 89
when John and Craig dissolved the Hermie dissolved the co-op, and Craig put money into it, and then they bought the inventory, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's when you guys moved it to that A-frame. But before that, you took over the downstairs.
Right.
No.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah.
We took over the whole building.
Took over the whole building. Yeah. Right. And then you had that little section of outdoor stuff down in the downstairs, right? And then you moved to the A-frame.
Right, but
that was many years later.
Years, yeah, in the whole building, and the first thing I did was get rid of the Amish pants and Chinese shoes.
No, you know what I did, dude? Hermie hired me, and I that's what I did for 4 months of all these back orders of. I sent these Chinese shoes to guys in prison. Who I don't know? Seriously, man, you remember, John? There are all these guys in prison who are using it for fighting or for I don't know, but I was sending them to people in prison. I'm in the back room. I'm in the back room, and there's shit piled up to the ceiling, and I'm listening to NPR, the book of the day, and I'm just folding up, broadfall pants and Hermie wouldn't let me use any. Well, what we did was we used grocery bags, the old brown paper grocery bags, and every broadfall pant, Amish pants, and Chinese shoes, I would package neatly in a grocery bag, and I'd put the label on it, and I'd send, and that's what I did for months. Do you remember, John?
Yeah, it sounds like I treated you like a slave or something back there.
It was cold. It was cold back there. Remember that upstairs? It was cold, man.
Yeah.
Well, did you guys? It sounds Charles. Yeah, or I'm sorry, Craig. Walk me through, because I think from that point, walk me from like Amish underwear into like the outdoor space, because this is when I first heard about Life Tools. It did. This is starting to make more sense, but yeah, when I was first introduced to the idea, it was like, oh, there was like this emporium of like tools for life, beer making, clothing, all that. So where did it go from there in terms of outdoor equipment?
Well, that was, everybody I met who I enjoyed in Green Bay, all the cool kids were at Life Tools, right? And when Life Tools was going under, then, we had to have a new vision. And I had this epiphany that I'm really literally going to move if we don't keep this store going, because this is the people I hang with and I meet. So then we re-envisioned Life Tools as an outdoor store, a legitimate outdoor store. And we kept the home brewing supplies because it was profitable and interesting. We kept futons for a while. We picked up sea kayaks. We picked up telemark skiing. So we found our niche. But more than anything else, we found a way to connect people with the outdoors. And everybody, and I mean everybody who was hip in Green Bay, would walk through those doors, and we became the central area for environmental causes, trail building, adventures in the area. We ran tours, we ran trips. We had Scott Berry's connection, the education component. That was really the mission of Life Tools. And we were never in it to make a lot of money. Unfortunately, we never did. But we made a lot of friendships, and those friendships endure today. And homebrewing, we brought in the bluegrass music. We had a house band.
Yeah.
Right? And we still have we had a house band for every Telefest has had music.
Yeah, that's true.
Homebrew. We've had skiing, tele skiing, and we've had connections with people. And so that part of the whole Life Tools has outlived the business, and in a positive way. We're still friends with everyone who walked through those doors.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And this kind of wraps us back to where we started before the introductions is, so we're talking, the co-ops going on like 74 into the 80s, and you guys pick it up as a business like in 1990. But where do you had you guys seen telemark skiing there in this Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan area prior to this, or when you brought in the metal edge cross country stuff, early on in Life Tools? I guess that is always what piqued my interest. Is you've got all this Nordic
there's no one skiing
there.
telly. No one was skiing telly.
So this is like 1980s is the first time you guys are seeing telemark skiing. Mike saw it, and then you guys are all sort of bringing it back, and then Life Tools becomes the hub. Am I understanding that right?
Mm-hmm,
you could say Life Tools became the hub. I came from Colorado with telly.
Yeah, and I hadn't seen any telemark through. I was skiing all over the Midwest. It was nothing.
Yeah, I did my my winter emergency care course to become a ski patroller at Pine Mountain, and they had to they flew somebody in from New Hampshire to test me as a telemark ski patroller at Pine Mountain. I was the first tele ski patroller in the Midwest, as far as I know, because this dude came from New Hampshire, because nobody knew the technique or what was a solid stance to, take a sled down the hill.
And this is in the 80s, Murph?
This is 90.
Yeah, 90.
This was 90-ish. Yeah. I was still on my. I bought those Chouinard Teutonage from Vail Mountaineering. This is 90. This was 90, and those Snowfield 2s.
Yeah,
which was a big deal. Because guys are skiing on old stuff. They do telly. It started out as ankle high leather boots, all lace up. The skis, they maybe had metal edges on, but they were skinny skis, and double camera. I mean, even the early telemark stuff.
They weren't sorry, Mike, but I gotta say the Chenard Toutenage, and somebody's going to call me on this, but the Chenard Toutenage was not a double camber ski. I don't believe, but they were made by Tua, and Tua, and I'm sure I hope somebody calls me.
Are you talking about the red Toutenage?
No, that was the other one. The Toutenage was blue.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. No, those were single camber.
They were single camber. Okay, good. But the thing about Tua and the early evolution of those skis, the sweet spot wasn't under boot. It was under the toe, or it was under the forefoot. It was under the ball of the foot. And Tua always touted. The Tua sweet spot, they had like the flex pattern, the curve of a Tua ski was slightly forward of center of ski. And I want to know if that's not correct.
See, this is fascinating to me, you guys, because it almost seems you got Murph goes out to Colorado. He's seen telemark in like 80-ish, late 80s. Craig, you came from Boulder, and I guess Scott, Mike, or John, did you guys see telemark previously before the Life Tools thing somewhere out west or east?
Oh, well, out west I'd seen it, yeah. But very small. It was still small out there. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a big deal in the 80s.
It was.
Yeah, I was out in I saw it out in Leadville in '87.
Yeah. Okay.
So the original tele skiers, as I'm sure you know, Josh, they were backcountry guys. You know, and they were the reason that they were tele skiing is they needed a technique they could get into the backcountry and make it down hills.
And they were cheap.
Yeah, cheap.
They were cheap. I mean, that was one of the reasons. I mean, I'm a climber and a paddler and a tele skier, and we're all cheap, man. You know, like you don't have to pay for a lift ticket; you just walk back up the hill.
Yeah. Well, okay, I love that. Okay, that answers some of my questions because that's that kind of sets the stage for like we're in 1990. Life Tools is going on. It's the hip spot in Green Bay, and
you guys in the Midwest.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the earliest shops that you guys know of in terms of, having telemark equipment, and I guess
sorry, Josh, but I am so proud. Life Tools was the coolest fucking shop in the Midwest. Midwest mountaineering, was big and it was in a big city and there's people buying stuff, but Life Tools was the essence of what was real, I think. I really do believe that.
How long did Life Tools last, John?
Well, yeah, I think we shut it down in 2005 or 4. What do you remember, Craig? Was that?
Yeah, 15 years. We had 15 years.
Yeah. So, yep. And, and there's other things that happened between the whole history of Telefest, that there's like a whole bunch of, Brian, after Life Tools carried it, Brian and Scott and Midwest Telemark Ski Company took it over. And then Downwind Sports took it over. And then, as you know, Josh, Keith has taken it over for the last 10 or so years.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you about that is, I guess, Scott, how did you get approached from like the instructional side of things for this whole shebang?
I asked him.
So I'm going to throw it out to these guys. What year do you think that was?
92.
91, 92?
Pretty early.
92.
Pretty early. Yeah. I don't know who it was. I don't know. I think it was Murph that asked. Maybe it was Craig. I'm not sure. Or John. To join Telefest. And, we brought started doing some ski clinics, out on the hill, some backcountry clinics. And I had a good crew. We had a big crew of help doing this. Yeah, probably forget names if I listed everybody, but there was always a nice crew. And then we started doing like the chili, and maybe this happened before too. We started doing the chili party in some of the races.
So,
The uphill downhill race, and you guys, was it the freestyle race?
Under the double, that
Slalom race.
Uphill, downhill.
uphill downhill.
Yeah, uphill down. Yeah.
Dude, how many years did Brad Nord win that thing? John Rutherford. And then it was Matty. And then it was Matty Nuukinen.
Well, Josh, and here's how things
But that's how I got involved, Josh, too.
And here's how things converged, Josh. So we had this bluegrass band that was the house band for Life Tools.
Yeah.
What's the mandolin player? Mm-hmm. He brews his own beer. He plays the mandolin.
And he shreds.
Band, and he shreds it on telly skis. And the first time I saw him, I'm going up the hill. He's got powder blue pants on, and I'm going,
and those yellow atomics.
And he just rips it up, and I go, what? And he brings his band along with him to camp in the woods in a heated tent so they could play at Telefest.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any more real than that. And he came from Montana. His roots were
Vancouver. He skied Blackcomb Whistler.
Yeah. And it's like, how do we
Bob Bruce
that the guy is a tele skier, a mandolin player, and a bluegrass player, and they're camping in the woods with a bunch of hillbillies who have to hike in a mile in the snow after performing. And these are not guys who even had shoes, right? They came with cowboy boots. Like, you got to go a mile down in the woods. And one guy would just smoke the wood burner all day so that they could sleep warm. It was just so organic and fun that tradition of music has continued throughout the whole festival, which is great.
Man.
Yeah, and
Bob rips.
If to kind of set this, I've done kind of like little debriefs after going to Telefest, but just to kind of, I think this is a good explanation of how it came to be too. Is first off, Porcupine State Park is a very unique state park, wooded area, obviously hills, and it's right on the edge of Lake Superior in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is actually part of Michigan for all of you rest of Americans that have never, it's not just the mitten of Michigan. There's like this whole other swath of land above it. And you know, and I think part of what Craig's saying, I mean, we talked a little bit about like this, you know, I think Mike was saying it's, you know, a bunch of guys sitting around a fire, you know, and sort of coming together. And then, you know, you're adding Murph and Scott into the mix, and you've got like clinics and that sort of thing. And I've heard those old stories of early Telefest as well, where you guys camped because it sounds like it. Tell me if I've heard this right, but it, you know, you drive up that road from Ontonagon and you get, it kind of just dead ends, right? Like at the park.
In
winter.
In the winter, yeah. And so I had heard about this, that it was basically like a snow camp of people, and then you guys are out there walking around the woods, like obviously backcountry skiing. And I guess, did the lift always exist on that hill when you guys started, or
yeah?
Okay, so there was always the single lift up the mountain.
No, there was a quadruple. There was a four-man chair and a two-man chair.
Yeah, and then
now
now
the two-man chair doesn't run.
Yeah, and then there was also the tow as well. It was bigger than it is today. So
T-bar,
and so in fact, to be honest, that what we did eventually when we got really sophisticated is we paid $3 to get a lift up the top of the mountain with all of our gear, and then we would unload, and we skied back into where the Virgin. Is it Hemlocks? I think back there.
Hemlocks, yeah.
You'd ski there.
It was a one-time lift ticket.
Yeah. So, and it was, you know, a bunch of guys. And I think at one time we must have like 12 or 15 guys, and you're just growing and growing. It started with 5, and then, it grew until finally, Craig and Brian and John said, hey, let's make this big. This could be something special.
Yeah.
And then we started having a big party at the A-frame and with the Chili Fest and bring your own beer. And for a while, they let us bring our own beer. So, all the homebrew guys were bringing their own beer in. And Brian can tell you stories about that.
Oh, boy.
How so was this? So in the beginning, was it like a sanctioned event that you guys like called the state park? Because to me, it just sounds like. I mean, that's what's so cool about this story is the background is literally like you're talking about 5 guys hanging out in the woods, bringing homebrew and whatever else, and then it just sort of evolves out of that. But like, was the Ski Hill aware of stuff until the chili cook-off thing happened, or even at that point when you guys?
Well, can I answer that? It was the Ski Hill was run by private
concessionaire Tony
and D. Managuzzo. Yep, and so we went through him, and pretty much he let us take over his kitchen, the whole chalet. And the park let us use like that little ski patrol shack outside. I don't know if it's still there.
I think it is.
And we called it Tele Central, and so that's what I remember.
I forgot to ask, how the hell from Green Bay did you guys come up with, hey, we're going to go up and hang out and start this little thing at Porcupine? Because, I mean, it's up. I actually haven't driven from the Green Bay side, but even driving from Minneapolis, I mean, it's not close. I mean, it's pretty far away. So how did you guys settle on that as the area you started going to?
It's Lake Superior.
It's the coolest place to be.
Right. We grew up there.
That's where, from an outdoorsman perspective, you guys, that's where you go.
It was the only place that you could go where you could camp, backcountry camp, and downhill ski. And it still is today. It's the only place you could do that. And so it just kind of made sense. Craig, what were you going to say?
Well, we got to know the Rangers over the years, and really they loved it because it was the biggest event in winter that they ever had for the numbers on the ski hill and a single day. So we got to know the Rangers almost on a first name basis. So one year, the Ranger comes up to me and he goes, Craig, can you get your guys to quit smoking weed underneath the chair? Get my guys to quit smoking weed? Will you stop the world from spinning? Guys? Right? It's like,
Craig, do you guys remember when we ran out of beer and the Rangers went to Berglund to get another keg? They drove to Berglund and bought another half barrel and brought it back, and then we drained it.
Those guys, they all learned to teleski, and on the cross country ski trail there, they made their own little. They made the track wider to fit teleskis.
Yeah,
when they grew the Nordic sections.
Yeah. It was
when they grew the Nordic trail, they made it wider it so the bindings wouldn't hit.
So our 75 millimeters wouldn't fuck up the trail.
They made their own thing.
So this was the Rangers were always connected with us because they enjoyed the weekend as much as they did. In fact, now, coincidentally, Higher Love is the sponsor of Telefest. So things go full circle.
I was gonna ask you about while you brought that up. Did you ever think weed would be legal and then they would sponsor this thing that you guys started?
No, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I just was laughing when Keith called me. He's like, "You're never gonna believe this. Like, I got a dispensary to sponsor Telefest." And I was like, God damn, man. I'm like, I think you might be the first person to ever pull off a weed sponsorship for a telemark festival.
Makes sense.
In those days, if we'd have known that weed was going to be legal, no one would have smoked it. It'd be too conventional.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's
Well, it's
funny.
always a gathering of, well, here's another thing about Telefest. I always told my wife at Telefest, if I am ever lost in the bush, you send the folks at Telefest to find me. These are the Midwesterns, the best outdoor folks in the entire Midwest. They have all the skills. They have all the expertise. They will find me. And that is true to this day. These are the most professional hardcores in North America.
Is
They're the
that
real.
that reminds me? Remember when was it Alan Feechy, Feechy and Hansi Johnson when those guys went out to Government Peak? Craig, were you with them? Bert was with him. Yeah, sure, yeah, Bert and Alan, of course. And I think Hansi was with him, and those fuckers went out and they were going to do a lap around Cloud Lake or
Government Peak.
yeah, but they're going to go around Mirror Lake to Government Peak and then come back. It was like this insane. Like, how are you going to do that in one day? And it started snowing. It was kind of warm too, and it was kind of that wet. We sometimes, if Gitchigumi's not quite frozen over, we can get some wet, heavy snow. And I remember just freaking out because those guys weren't back yet, and it was after 10 o'clock. I mean, there was like a 12-hour trek around Mirror Lake out to Government Peak and back. And I remember going, Jesus Christ, are we really going to have to send? Do we really have to do we have to go look for these guys? And then they showed up. It was at the 11th hour, so to speak. I was like, man, I think we got to put together a team, and who's not high and drunk?
Yeah.
It was like, oh man, I was really worried for those guys. I got a text from Hansi. I reminded him, and he was like, yeah, we did that. Yeah, it was cold. Yeah, it was wet. Yeah, but I wasn't afraid. I think I forget what he said. But do you remember that? Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
One of the few things.
Oh, the cash box, John. Remember that?
So what's unique about the Porkies too is you can legally camp there in winter. So we would have to register with the park rangers. And one year we had over 80 winter campers. It was like
Nice.
they were blown away that you have 80 winter campers who are here for Telefest. So they'd spend the night in the woods, literally spend the night in the woods. They'd ski in the morning, ski all day. Your lifts wouldn't be running anymore. And they'd head back into the bush and camp. And that was a big part of Telefest. It still is. But we don't get the numbers we used to. Those folks were really, and John really led that whole gang. John and Mike Stone and really led the whole gang of winter campers. And that was part of Life Tools' mission too, is getting people outside in the winter.
I would have camped more often if I didn't have all the swag to tote around. My God, you remember the amount of stuff we used to get?
Oh
God.
John, you might be. I'm curious because like what Craig was saying is, this might be a good question for you to field, because one of the unique things that I think about telemark out there, and he was talking about winter camping, and even to this day, I obviously live in Salt Lake, so I'm in the Rockies, and so when we say touring, for instance, it's kind of a different touring. The word touring out here kind of has a different connotation than I think how maybe a Midwest telemark skier would look at it. I guess the first thing I was curious about is as Life Tools was giving access to people with equipment, and then you've got some instruction. I mean, how many people were people being attracted to it from a travel / make turns / I'm an outdoors person, just sort of an extension of getting out, because that's kind of what these early Telefests remind me of, is winter camping, life skills in the woods, kind of that hardier person that's traveling around on their skis, and they also know how to make tele turns. I mean, does that kind of prompt any thoughts on how it was back then?
Sure. And it did start out with, we tried to use backpacks and there'd be some really big backpacks, and and then eventually you kind of leaned or realized that you could put stuff on a sled, and quite honestly, over the years, we went from going to like Union Springs, which was quite a ways back.
Yeah.
Miles.
Miles, yeah, like probably 5 miles or something like that, and some pretty good terrain. And then over the years, we've gotten closer and closer to where the hill is. And,
now the park wants us to camp in the parking lot. I'm like, no, I don't think so. The last year, and I'll tell you,
Really?
John just had John was your 70th birthday? 70th this past couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
We partied at my house, by the way. If you weren't there, you were square. And
Yeah.
well. So anyway, John last year and myself and a couple we were still camping, for Telefest up there. So
Really?
yeah, wind blowing like a SOB. So
Down in the deer in the deer yard.
Deer yard. Yeah, we're camping down in the deer yard, sledding our stuff in.
Yeah.
So
that's what I think's really unique about you guys in that zone, because I feel like and here's an interesting thing too, because when I've been back to Morgedal, where telemark started in Norway in the telemark region, and I'll tell you what's interesting is it looks a lot like the Porkies. It's very similar terrain, and I think that's what's beautiful about kind of what you guys did with Life Tools and then starting the Telefest. It's I think telemark has a lot of varieties to it, and I think one of the things that's interesting about specifically the Midwest that I've started to pick up on, and I think you guys are obviously a part of that history, is sort of this ability to be a good telemark skier, like using that technique, but also it's like the travel aspect of it, like the way that you guys use your skis. It's a life tool. It's like, hey, I'm going out in the woods, and it's snowing, and I'm gonna move through the mountains, and when there's a hill, I'm gonna ski it, and when it's flat, I'm gonna walk it.
Hey, I'm still on.
I don't know. It's really interesting talking to you guys, because you guys really it's a very unique zone, in terms of like even how Mike said, you guys are out camping still. Like, I don't know if a lot of people would appreciate that, maybe appreciate it, but like, you guys are a lot more hardcore than I think. It's like outdoor. It's like the outdoors mixed with telemark as like this life tool, which is really neat. So
Well, you hit on two big ideas here. One is that telemark skis in the Midwest, and Mike Stone I quoted him one time saying, telemark skis makes the Midwest hills the Rockies, and it makes the Rockies the Himalayas. And that is dead on. So that was my appeal. All these guys are really good skiers on downhill bondage boards. They could rip it out. It's not the challenge that it is on tele skis for them. So that was a big, big appeal for me and for the rest of these guys. That's number one. And number two, the park has really embraced the new van life camping thing now. Mm-hmm. They set up a whole parking lot now at the Porkies where we can now legally van camp, which was for a couple of years, they issued me a ticket one time for parking my van there.
For vagrancy.
I got in there and I said, I have been doing this for 30 years and you're going to tell me I couldn't Telefest.
How much did it cost?
The Rangers came to my defense and said on the sly, we're going to talk to her. Next year, it was legal again. They actually put up a porta potty. So that brings in a whole new generation of people who enjoy the tele life and the van life. And those, again, it's an intersection of connections that keep this festival going.
Yeah, it's really neat to see that. When I think the word organic gets thrown around a lot, but I mean it's truly fascinating to think how from the moment you guys took over Life Tools and then sort of all these friendships, all of you on here, like how that fed into something that's been around for, next year's 35 years. That's a long, long time, And I mean, do you guys, I guess in retrospect, you guys had to have influenced so many people like learning how to telemark ski, or they saw telemark skiing for the first time? I mean,
babies have been made because of Telefest.
It's true. I hadn't thought about that, but that's
It's true.
Probably true.
It's definitely generational.
Yeah.
From
Well, Keith was up. Keith was up there when he was a kid. I mean, Scott and I were talking about this earlier. Keith was probably that one little kid that was tele skiing, and we were like, "Wow, there's a little kid tele skiing," and it was probably Keith. I didn't know, but he says he was there, and it was probably him. But I remember seeing that little guy on tele skis a long time ago.
We were talking last night, and it was pretty funny.
And now he's a big guy.
He's a big guy. We were talking last night because it's been they had to relocate because of the snow conditions at Porky's this year.
There is no climate change, just so you know.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we were talking. I said, "Hey, I'll try to help get the word out," and he's like, some people that come to Telefest, they're not going to know that there was a change because they're not on the internet. They're not on this. Well, and so he told me a funny story is his dad was convinced like this has got to be sometime in the, he told me it was like 2000. So none of us have cell phones or very few people.
That was a good year.
And I guess his dad's for sure. This is Telefest weekend. They hop in the car, they drive all the way up there because, and to your point about the camping, they were so worried they were going to be late because he said there would be the parking, and then they'd have to hike further because there were so many people there that were snow camping. And they get there, no one's there, and they couldn't figure it out. So I think they ended up camping somewhere close by, and then they walked over to the hill in the morning, and there's like someone who had posted a sign up that said Telefest next weekend. And they were both just like devastated because they had to work the next weekend and stuff. So it was
well, analog. Yeah, we there's been, like we said previously, Scott and I, we moved it back because of bad weather years. And they just don't have snowmaking capabilities there.
Right.
Josh, you'd mentioned that, somebody had, we didn't have the communication that we have today. And when you think about it, in especially the early 90s, and we didn't have cell phone, we didn't have the internet, and still the numbers of the skiers got really big.
Really?
And it was all because of, posting a sign at Life Tools, and then guys just spreading the word around. And I don't know what you guys, Craig, Brian, Scott, what do you remember? I mean, some of those years, 200 maybe, 120 skiers.
No, man. I think when John Manders started the woods on fire, but didn't start the woods on fire with the fireworks, I would say there's 300 or more. Wouldn't
you guys started the woods on fire?
No,
I think the biggest year was. I agree with Murph.
Yeah,
probably 300.
Yeah, it was big. It's huge.
It was the chili was gone instantly. The beer was gone so quick because you weren't expecting it, and just the locals would come listen to the music.
I actually have a video of a couple of those early years that were big. That just spread by word of mouth, and you can get a feel for it if you look at the video and you see all those tele skiers coming down the mountains. You can kind of get a feel for how many, and like the party, you can get a feel for how big it was. All done by word of mouth, yeah.
And so it wasn't really. I mean, even though Life Tools was sort of like the center point, I guess, for your area. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because I sort of forget. I mean, everything back in the day, and this is a common theme when I talk to event organizers from telemark in the 80s and 90s. Like, yeah, literally it was flyers, because I'm always like, how did you even find out about this stuff? I mean, were you guys seeing, out of those 300 people, are we talking from these main 3 states in the Midwest, like Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, or was it, hey, we're in Green Bay, so it's primarily Wisconsin people?
We had a pretty big following from
Canada, Alaska, Colorado,
Yeah. And we had a real big following from lower Michigan. And those people still come today. They come every year. The Duluth group was huge and still is, and became lifelong friends with everybody, too. I mean, it's like, really, those connections are what keep me engaged in Telefest. We look forward to year round because I only see these folks once a year, and I feel like they're my best friends. I mean, it's just
I think a lot of people may have. It was a lot of word of mouth. Silent Sports was a great publication for us.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was it called?
Silent
Sports was a printed. It was a magazine. Silent Sports, all the silent sports, cross country skiing, telemark skiing, I don't know, whatever, paddling, So that was a good vehicle to get Telefest out there. Scott knew people. I knew people. We typically I would put together like a poster or a flyer or something like that. And just mail it to other shops. I mean, I was pimping as hard as I could, and I didn't know how to be a pimp. I would just send them. I sent stuff to Air One, to what was it? Adventures Unlimited in Milwaukee. Is that what that was? Yeah.
Yep.
Midwest Mountaineering, and then of course Downwind, and Downwind has a big part of Telefest history. They helped tremendously, and then was it Moose Jaw, Scott? Moose Jaw down, was that? Wasn't that?
Yeah,
Toad?
a little bit with Moose Jaw too. Toad used to work there.
Yep. So it was just old school advertising, but there was always like a poster, and it was like, the rip off of the Neptune Mountaineering guy.
That's what I was asking you before we started, and that's probably a good thing to bring up. So the porcupine is, this is a pretty. I would say in our little world, I would like to think the porcupine is becoming an iconic thing. Which okay, actually, I should probably. I haven't. Oh, there you go. Craig's got it.
Brian Day.
Yeah, so, Brian. Yep. Yeah. The one with the lightning bolts. Yeah, that was my Grateful Dead. That I was like, dude, we need some lightning bolts coming out.
I love that Corky logo. Yeah. That's original.
And Murph, you were saying that you've got the idea for the porcupine from the Pinheads from Hell sticker from Neptune Mountaineering.
Oh yeah, it's a ripoff. I'm sorry, Gary.
It's all good. Well, funny enough.
It was Gary Neptune, right?
Yeah, Gary Neptune.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Josh, I think every time I pull out my hippie sticks, somebody comments, and in the Midwest, when I'm a hippie sticker on the mountain, somebody says, "Hey, are you going to Telefest?" There is a bond of skiers, tele-skiers, that runs deep, and they give you a tele tap, and they are the first to try to pony up next to you in line, and they talk, "Hey, are you going to Telefest?" Right? It's iconic in the Midwest, and it's that culture. It's not like any other ski event. It's a thing.
What do you guys what do you guys think it is? Because Craig, you've hit on. I think all of us have sort of hit on this, because there's something about telemark and all the variations of it. Like I said, Midwest teleskier might look a little different than like a Rockies guy or a California person or East Coast, but that's what always increased my passion, is like when I would travel through. I was telling you guys all the places. I would go show my telemark movies, and I would meet these pods of people, kind of like you guys were getting, word of mouth. And then these people show up to this event, and what do you guys think it is that binds us all together as telemark skiers? Because it's not like we're all the same people, we might like bluegrass, but we might not. And I feel like you get a lot of different people, but for whatever reason, and I'm always asking people this because I'm not sure what that intangible is, but it seems like we're all cool with each other just because of telemark skiing. Oh, Murph, what do you think it is?
I think, and this is a non-answer, but I think that anyone who isn't a telemark skier thinks that telemark skiers are just trying to be cool.
Because we are.
Because we can ski telemark. and it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Yeah.
I love doing 10,000 deep knee bends in one day,
I think it's.
I love the technique. I'm not trying to be cool. I just love skiing that way. To me.
It's I think
So it's
primal.
to me, it's the technique.
Yeah. Sorry, John, what were you going to say?
Oh, just to say, trying to reach for an answer, but I mean, it's a primal tribal event. And then like Josh, like you mentioned in your podcast too, about that whole sensation, and Brian, you're referencing it, it's a sensation that you don't, it sets your brain on fire or something, just that feeling. And I remember the first time linking turns.
You put two turns together?
Yeah, at the Porcupine Mountains in Powder, and Craig, we were there with Mike Thiem, and and it was just like
Leather boots.
we were just screaming. It was just so much fun.
Yeah. I think, people that do telemark, they're the kind of people that do things because it's hard, and there's a certain like-mindedness of it. They tend to be outdoor guys. When you see guys at telemark, they tend to also be kayakers, and they tend to be bicyclists, and, they tend to do the hard things, where, downhill skiers, alpine guys, they'll spend a lot of their weekends watching TV and, watching, sit around eating junk. But, where a lot of guys you see telemark skiing, those guys are always outside doing something, so you'll be paddling with these guys in the summer, telemark skiing with them in the winter, so that's, I think that's one of the things that unites them. You can kind of feel a common mind with tele skiers because they do the same kind of thing. Kind of the guys that extreme, do things that are tough.
Yeah, something that takes work.
Yeah.
What do you think, Scott?
Yeah.
There was a sticker last year that I got at the last teleski thing, and it said, "Your girlfriend cares that I teleski," and I think that kind of says it all.
Oh, I love that. Well,
it really is an attitude, and in the Midwest, that attitude still rocks.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I love where you guys live. I honestly
It could
think
be a Midwestern thing. I don't know.
Well, and I think that
An ethic,
I think what's and we might have to do a second part, you guys, because I think there is a lot of history to this. I will mention that you guys ran up to like 05. It sounds like with live tools. The event obviously carried on. I think Downwind picked it up from you guys, right? Is that up in Marquette?
Well, from Scott and I. Love Tools was kind of out of it at that point, and then Scott and I did it, and then we asked Bill Thompson to, take it over. And
Bill,
I don't know what year it was.
Yeah, it was because Bill Thompson was the Downwind guy.
Yeah.
Because I bumped into him later on, probably I think he even had it probably 2009 still.
Sure.
Does that sound right? Somewhere in there, yeah.
It,
It's all good. That probably is going to be another podcast.
be fun.
For sure. No, I think 30, you guys probably need to write a book about this. I mean, 35
I was
years,
thinking that too.
35 years of Telefest.
But how do you put it like?
You can publish it after we're all gone, and that way you don't have to answer any questions. So funny enough, I was going to mention, and I'm going to have the porky. I wanted to mention this before we hop off. The porcupine is actually Keith and I did a collaborative graphic for some of my protector skis that has the porcupine, our Unity Tracks logo,
Nice.
and Old Lake Superior. So we're gonna have I'll have those out there.
Cool.
Are you guys all going to be able to make it to the fest?
Yeah.
Scott?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm in.
Scott, are you going to be back in Munising? Can we climb next week? Okay. Yeah. All right.
Perfect. I love it. Well, I hope I see you guys there. I want to thank you guys for what you've done. And it's so funny because I feel like as I'm tracking everyone down, you're probably like, yeah, we just took over a co-op and it is what it is. And then we all hung out around a fire, but I appreciate it because if you hadn't done that, a lot of people wouldn't be telemark skiing. I wouldn't be driving out to Michigan next week. And it's cool. And I think the Midwest is, I've always said it, you've still got semi-affordable ski hills and you got a lot of backcountry terrain, and I think a lot of people can get into telemark as long as they can find the gear, and hopefully the next generational import futons and telemark gear and we'll have the next generation of tele skiers. But I guess before we sign off, you guys, anything else you guys want to add to podcast number 1 of the Midwest history?
I'll say this, John, we just had John's birthday party a couple weeks ago, 70 years old. We had over 25 people there. Every single one of them were friends of Life Tools Co-op that he started. There were some people in their 20s that were, couldn't have been there, but they were almost all telemark skiers that started with Life Tools Co-op that learned to ski through that. And we had people in their 20s there that were also tele skiers that had learned how to tele ski from those people, from the people that had, originally learned through Life Tools. So, it started the Midwest telemark skiing as far as I'm concerned. And even today, the younger generation that are tele skiing are learning from those guys that had started back through Life Tools Co-op and Brian and Craig and Scott and John, that brought it forward.
I love that. It's cool to see. It's cool to see that trickle effect, you guys. I'm so excited that I even met you guys because I've always wondered. I'm like, how did all this happen out there? Yeah. And it's cool to be able. I'm so glad we got all of you guys on at the same time just to chop it up and kind of share some of the ideas. It's pretty fun.
I just like to say, Telefest has always been about the people, and we thank you for sponsoring Telefest and for Keith for advancing the cause, because it's for us, it's about the people. For me personally, anyway, and all my best friends will be there.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you this Telefest, everyone that's there.
All right.
And
it's fun. Thanks, Josh.
Yep. Thanks, you guys. We'll talk to you soon. See you.
Take care, man.